Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on empowering language learners, techniques to motivate and retain interest. My name's Sabrina, and I'll be your host for today. Today's topic is all about keeping language learners motivated and engaged. We'll explore techniques to capture and sustain student interest, a crucial challenge for any educator. And who better to guide us through this than Diego Ojeda? Diego is a dedicated Spanish teacher and a recognized world language presenter across the country. Known for his innovative approach and deep cultural insights, he co-founded LangChat and Charla L1, two popular networks for world language educators. Diego brings unique, forward-thinking ideas to the language classroom, and I am excited for all of us to learn from his expertise. Diego, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. First of all, I would like to apologize for my voice because I've been a little under the weather. So I have my water here. I'm gonna try to make it without any kind of interruptions. So thank you very much. Let's get started. So we're talking about empowering language learners. Techniques to motivate and retain interest. So the key word here is motivation, or perhaps instead of motivation, is probably demotivation, because when our students are motivated, well, that's not an issue, right? But when they are not motivated, that's when we need to stop and think what's happening, what's going on here in the classroom, what's going on with our instruction. For those who doesn't know me, I teach Spanish in Louisville, Kentucky, and I currently teach two sections of Spanish 4, one section of AP Spanish language, and one section of AP Spanish literature. I have been teaching for 34 years, 25 of them in the United States, and at every level of instruction, including college. So I'm saying this just because that helps you understand that I have an overview. I have a view that is, I have been lucky to um, teach in different contexts and mostly to have that experience. So um, the things that I'm going to share today are partly my own experience and partly research. So let's get started. This is the agenda for today's session. First, we're going to talk about motivation and its implications in world language instruction. Then we're going to talk about kinds of motivation. What kinds of motivation are out there? Then we're going to talk about how to motivate language learners, and we're going to see some specific activities. We're going to see some specific examples. Then we're going to talk about strategies to keep up the motivation. So how can we maintain, that energy throughout the year? And finally, we're going to finish with the 10 commitments for motivating language learners. Kind of like conclusion, closing, with these 10 ideas that are going to help us maintain the motivation in our classes. So let's get started with motivation and world language implications. Let's start thinking, what are those things that challenge us in our instruction, in our world language instruction? So the question, what causes student demotivation in our world language classes? So if you want to use the chat, I would love to see what you have to say about this. So the question, what causes student demotivation in world language classes? And I'll read you and we'll go from there. It's too difficult, not at their level. Okay. It's too hard, too much effort. Okay. Um, so I'm reading some of these, right? It takes too long to learn, too many distractions, They don't understand a lot. They think that it's not interesting, not exciting. Kids making fun of others, not important. Why learn when Google Translate exists? Okay, so we see different challenges here, right? Being required to take the language is very uncomfortable. They're afraid to take risks learning something new. Thinking is an easy high school credit. Oh, thinking that is an easy high school credit. Okay, so no wonder why we had so many registering for this webinar, because this is a reality in our world language classes. We encounter demotivation, we encounter challenges in our classes that, sometimes really um, have an implication in what we do, in how we teach, in how we perceive our life, because we're human and this affects every aspect of our life. So I agree with everything that you guys are writing on the chat. I think it's important to always think, okay, what are those things that are challenging? I see different topics here. The first one that I see is it's too hard. Many people wrote that students think that it's too hard. Um, Now, the question is, why is it hard? Because we are making it hard for them, because we are not using techniques and strategies to take them by the hand and welcoming them into language learning? Or is it too hard because they just don't want to put the effort? And some of you wrote that. I also see that sometimes behavior and classroom management, it's also an issue. And to be honest with you, when those issues happen, it's more like an institutional issue, not so much your teaching, right? But what is the school's philosophy on classroom behavior? What are the expectations? What support do we have as teachers? Or are we left alone in this particular aspect? See? Someone else and some other people wrote technology. Google translates everything. ChatGPT translates everything. Okay, and that is true. So, what kind of tasks are we bringing to the class, and what kind of activities are we bringing that are just easily to be done through translation online? So that's the question that we must ask. So there are three important things, that makes us think about all those challenges that we have in our classroom. So types of demotivation. When we talk about demotivation, meaning not motivation, we can have, the demotivation also affects teachers. And sometimes we, the teachers, um, are not motivated, we lack of enthusiasm because we don't get feedback, because maybe we're criticized, I don't know, by families, by the administration, by the students. So that doesn't help with teacher motivation, right? The learning environment, it's key. And if the learning environment is not positive, then that affects motivation. So we keep talking about demotivation. When we have also the motivation when the students feel that the activities are irrelevant, that they are repetitive, that the activities are difficult, they lose interest. So let's keep in mind, irrelevant. So let's think about relevant activities. Repetitive. So let's think about things that are not as monotonous. And when we think also about difficult activities, okay, how are we bringing the activity? How are we presenting the activities to the class? Sometimes also peers interfere, and sometimes the students are not motivated because there's peer pressure. there is negative attitudes. There is a lack of communication and collaboration among classmates. So that's another issue as well. Sometimes students lack of self-confidence. I can't do this. And you hear, I cannot say it in English, much less I will be able to say it in Spanish or German or Italian or French, whatever language they're learning. So that self-confidence. So when we talk about peer pressure, when we talk about self-confidence, then we're talking about community building in the classroom, which is another element that is going to help us um, overcome these issues that I'm presenting right now. And external demotivation, uh, outside factors outside of the classroom. They can be as easy as kids listening on their communities or at home that it's not important to learn another language. The other thing is that we are in the United States of America, so there are um, situations that are particular to the United States, and those situations affect language learning. So we're talking about the motivation. Now, let's focus on the motivational part. Some of you might know Daniel Pink. He wrote a bestseller book, his book named Drive. And in this book, he talks about motivation. He talks about what are those things that, really influence motivation in people in general. So he says that motivation is driven by three intrinsic factors. To understand intrinsic factors, we need to understand extrinsic factors. So intrinsic factors means that they come from inside, that is not an outside influence. In other words, an extrinsic factor could be that the student is motivated because the teacher is giving points, positive points, or grades with each activity that they do. Or maybe the teacher is giving food in the classroom. Or maybe the teacher is giving fake dollars that they can turn into objects or pens or I don't know, anything. That's extrinsic and extrinsic factor. But for Daniel real motivation happens by when we focus on these three intrinsic factors. The first one, autonomy. So let's think in our classrooms, how autonomous are our students? Um, how much are we willing to allow autonomy in our instruction? Next one, mastery. And the next one, purpose. So these three things, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So let's look at these three important factors. So he says when people is intrinsically motivated, they perform better. They are motivated to keep going, to keep learning. They are engaged. So when we talk about the world language classroom and we think about autonomy, let's think about specific examples. We think about choice-based projects. So like for example, choose your own adventure project. So allow them to design their own projects. And this is something that I struggled with at first. I always wanted to propose, even give them, suggest them different kinds of projects that they could work for a specific topic. But one day I thought, why not allow them to come up with their own projects? Well, we guide them. We guide them and we can help them with the steps and we can help them with a rubric that is fair, but this autonomy really creates a motivational environment that the student appreciates because they see a purpose there, right? So it's very important to consider autonomy when we think about projects, not always going with the project that is very structured and that has every little step that the students have to work on. So let's open it a little bit. We have also other activities in the world language classroom like language centers. interest-based language centers. So we just give them a topic and then they will start being autonomous, bringing the samples and the ideas about that specific topic that we want to um, that they want to present on. Digital storytelling with choice boards. So choice boards are great. And when we do this kind of activity where they can include technology, that is another motivator for them. Let's ask them to keep doing videos. Let's ask them to keep doing podcasting. Let's do story digital boards. This is talking their language as well, but let's give them the freedom. So whenever we present a project in the classroom, allow them to present that project in different ways. Not always you have to create a poster. And in this poster, you need this, and this. No, open it. So, this is the idea, this is the topic. Connect yourself to the topic. What is the media that you think it will be showing better what you have in your head? What tool do you think more comfort you feel more comfortable with to bring up and present this project to the class? Okay. The second, intrinsic motivation aspect, mastery. So, building challenges. For example, fluency challenges. Let's set a goal. So, how many new words or phrases do we learn each week? So, it's different from giving a quiz every week or a test. Is more like a challenge. Let's set a challenge and let's set up activities and maybe little competitions in the classroom where they can show how much are they building from these challenges. Okay, so they can, as I said here, they can add their most used phrase on a classroom board. So it's important for them to track progress. It's different to assess than tracking progress. So when I think about the example of basketball, when we assess, we're looking into the way the player is moving, dribbling, throwing the ball, right? We assess that way. But when we are um, setting a goal, when we have a challenge, then we want to improve, what we were good at the week before. And not always assessment shows us that, because usually assessment it's particular to a unit, to a lesson, to a time frame. And the student don't see this building kind of like a challenge will do it. Some other ways to master skill building challenges is like, for example, offering the students language level badges. So we come up with these badges related to reading comprehension or conversational skills, writing accuracy. If you go to Facebook, for example, and you are very active in one of the Facebook groups, they're going to give you a badge that says this is a recognized member. This is a person who's always sharing, or this is a person who's always asking questions, very active. So you have kind of like a badge. And I remember Noah Geisel from Colorado. He's so good at this system with badges that we can, try to use in our instruction as well. So why not? I mean, maybe they can wear those badges, with honor on their sweaters or shirts or little stickers that they put on their binders. So it's visual. So they feel proud of having those little stickers in the binder. We assess proficiency and we tell them, okay, well, your proficiency is improving. Uh, a month ago, you were novice low, but now you're novice mid. Okay, well, that really doesn't mean that much to the student, other than I have a better grade, right? Which is the most important thing for them sometimes. But if we make it into a badge and we can put those badges in the student's binder, then they have that visual that is going to make them feel very proud because they are mastering whatever we're doing in the classroom. Also, reflective feedback from classmates. It is very important that we allow time in our classes for students to give feedback to each other. I'll tell you a story this week, and this is something that I never done before. Um, in my school, we have to do oral assessments, which I just do not agree as much with oral assessments because my way of thinking is like in the classroom, we're always using the language, we're always communicating. In other words, we're always interacting, speaking. Why do we have need to have an oral assessment? That looks a little artificial, right? In my mind, okay? But I have to do the oral assessment. And of course, what is the first thing that happens when you tell the students that they're going to have an oral assessment? They freak out. Absolutely, they freak out and they start asking questions. How many questions? How are we going to do this? Senor, are we going to go outside of the classroom and we're going to have to talk to you individually? Or are people going to be able to hear what we're saying? They freak out. And the day of the oral assessment, some kids, I mean, are close to faint because they are so nervous. I'm not exaggerating. This is reality. This is true. For those of you like me who have been language learners, we know that those first interactions are nerve-wracking. But we put our students in through these situations, and I don't want that anymore. So I created a way for them to assess the oral component with a partner. And I created this rubric with specific indications and asking them feedback, written feedback. Why you think that the answer was right? What do you think the student lack of in their answer? Um, and I told them, guys, this is the first time that I'm going to do this as a as an official quiz. You gotta show me that this is going to work. Well, they did it very well. I was there. I was listening to them asking each other questions. And then I asked them, how did it go? And they said that they didn't feel the stress that they have been feeling for the last 4 years at the high school when they have to be subjected to these oral assessments. So the reflective peer feedback is so important. This is a way, but there's another way. Whenever we have presentations in the classroom, um, I tell the students at the beginning of the year, guys, we're gonna present, we're learning here. So chances are that maybe we have little mistakes in our presentation, maybe in the slide, maybe the way you said things, right? Yeah, that happens. So you have two options. You can either write down, all those mistakes and then share with the student, or you can involve the class and you tell them, guys, every time that you're presenting, the class is going to be looking up, for good language in your presentation. So after the presentation, we're going to open the discussion and we're going to ask the class, is there anything that we can change here? See? And they start pointing at things. You need to talk to them so they don't take it personal. But it's another peer feedback strategy that has been very successful in my class. Okay? All right. So keep going with Daniel Pink. The last intrinsic strategy is purpose. In other words, real world application. So one of these activities is the community connection interviews, where we seek people, preferably who speaks the target language, but that are part of our community, and we simply interview them. If we are in a very novice low level, we can interview them just about their names, country, where are they from, family, very simple things. But if we are on a higher level, like Spanish 4 or AP, then we start asking questions that are a little deeper. But real world application, this is so important. Yes, there is ChatGPT, there is Google Translate, there's technology everywhere, but nothing will replace people and nothing will replace that contact, that we can allow our students to have to real people. So another venues are, for example, the pen pal or virtual exchanges. And I know that sometimes this is a little painful to set up, but we don't always have to look for pen pals in other countries. We can set up pen pal exchanges with teachers within our city, state, or country. So we can do that easily. And if you are active on social media, you can ask questions. You can say, hey, I'm interested in opening a PayPal project with my Spanish 2 students. Anyone interested? And I'm sure that this is gonna um, happen. The opportunity is gonna open. Or service project collaborations, partnering with community organizations. Um, I'm a Spanish teacher. There are some community organizations here that work with Hispanic immigrants. One of them is called La Casita, and I take my students to La Casita just to hang out with the people who goes on a regular basis there, just to chat, just to have a conversation. And I encourage them to have these conversations in Spanish. And that's so meaningful. You don't have to actually do something specific. We tend to say, okay, we're gonna do community work. We're going to go and put up some trees. We're gonna go and give presents to the people. We're gonna go and we're gonna clean the backyard. No, just connecting to the people, allowing them to talk to people. That's a service project collaboration that is meaningful. All right, my friends. So, kinds of motivation. Please let me know in the chat. What do you see right now on the picture? What is that picture of? Tell me in the chat. What do you see in the picture? Ah, okay. Okay. Say it in your language. What language do you teach? Say it in the language that you teach. Let's see. Una bombilla, dicen. A light bulb. Okay, you teach English. Oh, no, mira, mira. Creo que está en francés. Y un ampoule. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I said that right. Okay, mira, en español hay otro nombre que es foco. Sorry if you don't speak Spanish, but yeah, it's foco. Okay? Okay, excelente. That's what you see. So, in actuality, it's not, because there's nothing here. Okay? This is air here. The hand is holding, yes, this part of the light bulb, but there's nothing here. So that's why I'm talking about how important is to not base our instruction on on artificial things. How important is that we bring things to our classes that are not artificial. What aspects of our world language instruction seem very artificial to our students? For example, okay, so what are those aspects? Okay, maybe when we're not able to connect with them in a more human, I'm not gonna say personal level, but in a more human level, they feel that the teacher is there because as them, they have to be there. And the teacher is not real, that the teacher is artificial. When we bring up activities that are taken from different um, tools that do not connect with the student's reality, that's artificial. I remember when I was learning a little bit of French when I was probably in sixth or seventh grade. I had a French class, and we had to memorize these little dialogues. I'm sorry, French teachers, but this was more or less what I had to memorize. La voiture de Jean, c'est Jean. Supposedly, in my bad French, that means Jean's car is yellow. And I was like, wow, I'm learning French, but what? Okay, who's John? See, and then there was a picture of John in the middle of Paris. and I will just look at the buildings and the aspects and different details of the picture, and I was just lost. So to me, that was very artificial. This is an image generated by ChatGPT. And there's an issue right now because artificial intelligence just gives you whatever, right? Today, I have some students presenting about a reading that we are doing on immigration, and it's about a family that immigrated to the United States. And they had to come up with three quotes from the reading and then explain those quotes, obviously in Spanish, and images that will represent those quotes. Of course, a couple of students use artificial intelligence. And let's just say that the main character, according to artificial intelligence, had blue eyes, blonde hair, and the story says that they are digging a hole under the wire fence. And then what ChatGPT gave them was a family uh, that, looked very American trying to cross to the other side. And that happens, that's very artificial. And that's not going to help our students, especially with the cultural aspect and the reality of the world. Sometimes our classes are a little bit artificial. We are very proud of the countries that speak the target language. I'm very proud of my country, Colombia, and we decide to decorate the classroom in a specific way, like it is here. Sombreros, flags, and lots of posters. Target language is country, maybe the map. Okay, so we kind of like create this environment, and we think that this is helping our students connect with the culture. Sometimes can be a little overwhelming for them to see everything here. So what is real? This is my classroom, and what I have on my walls, instead of having all these flags on all these decorations and posters, I ask my students to bring something that is really important to them. So I know that they cannot bring the objects, so I ask them to bring a picture. So this student obviously plays the guitar, for example. This student loves volleyball. This student loves Ferrari and cars. And this is a bag of trail mix because this student really likes trail mix. I said, bring something that is part of your identity. And we're going to decorate our classroom this way. That's a very first step to real. We want the students to feel welcome and to feel at ease in the classroom. Let's bring these kind of things. Let's make sure that when we bring activities to the classroom, these are activities that really reflect the reality of the students. What are those interactions where students communicate with each other? See? Because we make them talk about the weather, we make them talk about food, but what are the real conversations that they have? Okay, it's easy. Let's just overhear them. Let's just hear what they are saying in the hallway during lunchtime. And I put the picture of the pizza because pizza is one of the favorite foods for everyone, including me, but more to my students, and the kind of conversations that they have when they are sharing a pizza. That's real. And always keep in mind that the context is the most important thing beyond the accuracy, beyond the form. The most important thing is the context. All right. So, another thing that is important, besides not bringing artificial elements to the classroom, is that we bring things that are relevant. When we bring sombreros to the class and the sombreros become a focal point of the classroom and the students get to wear the sombrero during Spanish class just because it's fun, number one, that is not very relevant to all of the Spanish speaking countries. Um, I went to Mexico City, and to be honest with you, I didn't see many people wearing the sombreros in Mexico City, right? So the stereotypes start growing. When we don't bring relevant things to our classroom, there is no way that we can explain the importance of that. So slowly but surely they can start becoming stereotypes, and we don't want that either. For example, this happens also at the language level. In Spanish, I hear so many people greeting the students like, ¿Qué pasa, calabaza? Nada, nada, limonada. Or the expression that surprised me the most when I came to the United States, ay, 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 ay. I got so scared. I'm like, what are they saying? What are they saying? Ay, 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 ay. And they were just trying to connect with me because they were told that in a Spanish class and in Spanish speaking countries, people will say, ay, 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 ay. And that was the first time that I heard that in my life. So, are these expressions relevant just because they rhyme? If I go to Colombia, one of my students goes to Colombia and they greet another person, ¿Qué pasa, calabaza? They're gonna have a really upset person. Are you calling me a pumpkin? What is this? So, it's cute and everything, but it's not relevant in the classroom. All right, let's go back and let's look at more ways to motivate language learners. So how can we motivate them? So remember, they learn better when they are engaged and feel that the topic is relevant, but not just relevant, but relevant to their lives. So I'm sharing this activity from Cledward Languages Reportero 3 that I'm working in my Spanish 4 class right now. It's about teenagers. The title says, Soy adolescente, I'm a teenager. ¿Qué me está pasando? What is happening to me? What I appreciate about this reading is that it's very honest. It's not just a description of who are the teenagers. And usually you see in textbooks when they talk about teenage life, you see pictures of teenagers hanging out at the park, teenagers going to the movies, teenagers doing this, doing the other activity, and trying to show us how, well, teenagers in the Hispanic world also do these things. Okay, we need to stop thinking that way because our students already know that teenagers in other countries do exactly the same as they do here. Why? Because of social media. In the past, yes, there were stereotypes and there was misinformation about what people do in other countries, about how people will dress in other countries, about behaviors, about politics, everything. But I really appreciate that these type of readings that you see in the Reporteros program are very honest. And I invite you to take a look, check them out if you have not. Let's think about how do we plan our classes. I'm sorry. How do we plan our classes? Do we plan our classes based on the curriculum? Meaning that we open the curriculum guide and this is the next chapter, this is the next lesson, these are the topics, this is what I'm going to teach. Or are we planning with a student-centered approach? Student-centered approach means that in order to plan my class for tomorrow, I'm going to think about my class today, how things went today in the classroom, how did the kids reacted to the lesson that I gave today, what did they like, what did they connect with, then do more. Do more. Oh, but we don't have time. We have to rush because the curriculum. No, do more because that's what's going to connect them and that's what's going to allow meaningful input. And that's what you want, that they get more input of that specific topic that you're trying to work in the classroom. What things didn't go well? How can I change my approach? Remember, these are things that might make things difficult for the student if we just go through the motion of following the curriculum or the program, right? That's what makes it difficult to them. We have the autonomy as well. We need to be autonomous as well because we want to be motivated as well. So let's have the autonomy to stop, refresh, extend, or limit, but not just thinking about the students. When you think about yourself as the teacher, you're thinking about the students because it's going to have an impact on your class. For example, last night I wasn't feeling well, and I had something in mind for my classes today. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I was like, no, I don't feel well. I don't think that's going to be a good delivery from my part with my students, but I don't want to give them busy work. I change it based on how I was feeling physically. And I think it went well because I consider, you know, how they were going to react. So a student-centered approach is keeping in mind our students, but not as a not as a generic thing. Each classroom is different. And I know that is hard. I know there's nothing better than having all the classes planned. But usually, when the teachers have all the lessons laid out for the entire school year, a lot of frustration comes with that because we're assuming that we have the same students that we had last year and 2 years ago and 10 years ago and 20 years ago. So we become the Aldemars of world languages. What is the Aldemars of world languages? I had a social studies teacher when I was in high school. His name was Aldemar. And Aldemar, I remember this like it was yesterday. He comes with his briefcase. He puts a briefcase on the desk, opens, and does this and start looking for lesson number 20. Today's lesson number 20, the paper was yellow because he has been using that paper for years. Or the situation where students, they don't need to take notes or anything. They just ask the student from the year before to share their notebook or their notes because it's going to be exactly the same. That is not student centered. It's not even teacher centered because that doesn't make us happy. Okay? All right. There's another activity here, Mi Mundo en un collage. So let's talk about things that we like, that we're concerned about, that we care. Let's give them that autonomy. Just bring whatever. There's not a specific topic that we need to talk about. Let's be ourselves. So the question is, what is most important, the what or the how? So when teachers ask me about planning, when we sit down to talk about how to plan our lessons, I tell them, the what is the most irrelevant thing. The most important thing is the how. How are we going to present the topic? How are we going to engage the students? How are we going to bring context to the particular topic so later on we can maybe look at the grammar, but not from the beginning. So the how is the most important thing. And I bring this example from Reporteros Uno, and it's actually the way each one of the lessons open in the Reporteros series, where the students engage in an exchange via text. So obviously the students connect with this kind of language because this is what they do. But what I like about this is that every lesson opens this way. There's a different character talking about a different topic with a different other person. But when the student goes through the program and they have the same opening that connects with them, it's very interesting. Instead of like having a totally different opening for each one of the chapters or each one of the lessons. Student at the center. So this is a project that I did with my students probably a few years ago, where they were the central figure of the activity. So they came up with their own magazine. So this student, he's a real student. His name Cal, Entonces es la vida de Cal. And this was kind of like an end of the year project. It was in May 2019. Okay. So of course I give them the directions on how it should look. But I'm going to show you a little bit of this because they were just fascinated because it was just about themselves and they wanted to present themselves the way they wanted. So they start talking about their childhood, and I said, you need to be as honest as you can, not just give me information, but allow the reader to get closer to you, to your personality. So they talk about different aspects of their life, escuela secundaria, classes. Uh, we went to eat at a restaurant. This was part of the class, not the whole class. Talking about the future, these were advanced students, so they had to use different samples of language. Um, and they, at first I asked them to do it on paper, but with the time that paper just gets ruined, so I started using it, asking them to do it digitally, so I can still show it. If you want the directions for this project, let us know. Write us an email to Clear World Languages, and we can share the project's idea. Okay, strategies to keep up the motivation. First, personal impact. And yes, that is me. This is when I used to have hair. So I was very young here. But what I'm trying to say here is that before coming up with a project, with a topic, it is very important that you show them how you connect with that particular topic. On this picture, I was extremely excited, as you can see, because we were going to go to the beach for the first time ever. So I was just jumping, very happy, and my mom happened to take this picture because I was that excited. Any topic, if you connect right away with anything that you bring to the class, that is relevant, that is engaging for the students, and then that motivates them to talk about themselves. But if we're always bringing topics that are kind of like disconnected with us, that doesn't work in a language class. Language is life. So we need to take from life to the language curriculum. Okay, so in Reporteros 3, there are some examples of these kind of activities where the students need to show things that are very engaging for them. So I'm talking about here the first time that I went to the beach. So this is a project about the first time you went to a specific, vacation. Okay? Surprising stories. So surprising stories uh, that where you're gonna use obviously comprehensible input so they are connected. Una experiencia sorprendente. But what I want to say here is that those stories do not have to always be real in the sense that you can play a little bit and make up a story just to keep their attention. So sometimes I will start the class like that, telling them what happened last night. And I will say in the target language, chicos, last night something awful happened to me. See, what happened, senor? Well, I got home after school, after working for 8 hours at school. I taught 4 classes, and lunch was good, but I wish I would have a little chicken because I like chicken, but they have fish. Fish is okay, and my classes were good. Notice how I'm just talking about something that is not specifically what happened that was awful. I'm just telling, my day. And then at the end, I can tell them, yeah, I got home. And when I opened the fridge, I realized that there wasn't any milk. But this is the end. And that happens after 5 minutes that I kept them engaged. Surprising stories, either make them up, or if you're a person who's always having these kind of like stories that are amazing for the students, tell them your surprising stories. Okay? There are some ideas here. Lost on a vacation, winning the lottery, disaster at a restaurant. You're gonna get to see the description later on when you get the recording. The unexpected guest. So come up with kind of like surprising different kind of plots for them either to make up or for you to make up when you talk to them. Surprising stories. So it's important to engage them through their own experiences as well, because we always, as humans, we experience different situations, that can be surprising to us or that can be different to the other ones, but they won't start sharing unless we have created this environment where, they feel that what they say is important. Another activity, my personal preferences. So, like for example, when we talk about food, well, let's autonomy. Let's allow them to talk about whatever they want, whatever food. And we know that these kids, most of them, they probably don't eat very healthy, but we need to know what they're eating. And if they're using the target language for that and they are connecting with the language, that's motivation. It's important to bring up topics that are inclusive, that do not challenge their identities. In other words, yes, we are learning a world language, but the first step is sharing about you, sharing about your identity, sharing about your culture. That's what is going to connect you later. But if we impose culture, if we impose world identities just because they need to know what's going on in the world and because they need to know about other cultures, that's not the way we want to go. We want them to get to know themselves first. So easy activities like a novice mid activity, the routine. And the students have very interesting routines. The routine is not the same as our routine, but sometimes you know that we use reflexive verbs to talk about routines. Sometimes we focus on specific verbs and we make them conjugate those verbs. Even if they don't take a shower, we want them to say that they took a shower so they can conjugate the reflexive verb. Well, if we are asking them about the routine, we need to be open to uh, accept what they bring as part of the routine. See, I feed the cat. It's not a reflexive verb, but it's part of the routine. All right. Empathy. So it's important also to have empathetic perspectives, considering their different realities. So when we talk about family, for example, we cannot expect every student to talk about mom, dad, siblings, because families look quite different from one student to the other. And we might have students who have two dads or two moms, or they don't have mom and dad, they live with grandpa and grandma. They are maybe foster kids. So that empathy has to be reflected in what we propose in our classes. And that's why autonomy, give them autonomy is important, because then they don't have to adjust to specific label, right? Okay, so there are more activities here that you can explore later on the Reporteros program when they talk about different types of family as well. And another aspect, universality. So it's important also to bring things that unite us. Yes, it's important, autonomy, it's important, identity, but what things unite us? Bring things like friendship, bring things like love, bring things like concerns that are global, that are universal, that matter to each one of us. So that way, our students do not have to wait until the AP class to talk about these global challenges or human challenges. So in the Reporteros 3, there's also cultural comparisons that allow the students to connect in a universal way to the world. And engagement. So remember, to encourage individual and collective commitment for our students. So the project, I make a difference. So how can I have an impact on my community? Remember, we talk about artificial versus real. How can we use the classroom, my world language classroom, to make a difference in my community? I want to tell you a story. So when I was working in Wisconsin, I worked at a public school for 14 years in Wisconsin, small town, and a town that wasn't very familiar with people from other backgrounds. In fact, I was the first Latino teacher at that school district. And I had many stories, but the main story here is that there was one year when a group of families from Uruguay came to this small town because they were working on landscaping, and this gentleman hired a bunch of people from Uruguay. At that time, people from Uruguay were able to come to the United States on a working visa without any problem. They could come here without any problem. So a lot of families moved to this little town that was close to Madison, Wisconsin. So obviously that created impact at school and friction. Students were not welcome, even though they were from Uruguay. They were always told, go back to Mexico. And when you tell a student from Uruguay, go back to Mexico, it's something different because students from Uruguay, people from Uruguay, Argentina, they're very proud of their heritage. Every one of us is very proud of our heritage. But when I think as a Colombian, if someone tells me go back to Mexico, I would just say, I'm not from Mexico, I'm from Colombia. But when a kid from Uruguay, teenager, hears go back to Mexico, that just creates, an issue. So there was friction. And I was like, okay, how can we make a difference here? How can we help this community understand that things change? Understand that we have newcomers to our community. So with my Spanish 4 classes and Spanish 5 classes, we created a section in Spanish in the newspaper, in the local newspaper. The local newspaper lady was very open, and she was okay, and she gave us a page, and we will write articles in Spanish for the newcomers, explaining how to drive in the snow, where to get heaters or gloves, or when to use gloves, or when the snow will come, because these are things that we didn't know. I didn't know when I came to the United States about these situations. And everything went well until subscriptors subscribers of the newspaper threatened to cancel their subscription if they kept seeing a page in Spanish. So the lady said, I'm sorry, guys, this is the way I earn my life. Uh, we have to close the page in Spanish. Okay, fine. But the lesson to those students was so important that years later they did, and they are doing their own thing to bring the community together. And that's why it's so important to come up with something. It doesn't have to be articles, come up with something to make a difference through language. There are projects in the Reporteros series, mini proyectos, that are related to this kind of community service. Sometimes when we do this kind of like um, campaigns at school, well, people knows, they see the posters, it says they're in Spanish, but what is the real value? So the real value is when they affect, in a way, the community. To finish, my friends, it is 7:58, so I'm gonna finish here with the 10 commandments for motivating language learners. This is not mine, and this is not new, but this makes so much sense. I don't know if I can pronounce their names well. They are from Hungary, Dornay and Sizer. And in 1998, they came up with these 10 commandments for motivating language learners. So, really fast. Set a personal example with your own behavior. Remember, your own stories, your own experiences, always bring them. Create a relaxed and supportive classroom environment. Let's make community before we care about language. Present tasks in an engaging way. So how we're gonna present, even if it's a grammar topic, how we're gonna present it, how we're gonna connect, how we're gonna bring context to that. Develop good relationship with the learners. That is key. That the students understand that we are there for them, but not in the sense that we're going to fix their personal issues. That we care about their learning, that we care about them day by day from when they come to our classroom. I'll tell you, the moment we create that connection with the student, the other things, especially those connected with language learning, are going to come easily. Increase the learner's linguistic self-confidence. Remember, we talk about mastery. Make the language classes interesting, not artificial, real. Promote autonomy. Personalize the learning process. So these are the 10 commandments that are going to help us having a better and more motivating environment in our classes. Goal setting. Familiarize learners with the target language culture, but from their own culture. More interculturality and less multiculturality. So to request a free sample of Reporteros program that I presented here, please scan this QR code, and I'm sure that Sabrina is gonna send you a link if you cannot scan the QR code in order to request a free sample from the Reporteros program. So, and then this is the Reporteros available in Spanish, French, and German. Thank you so much. Sabrina, we're in your hands.
Thank you so much, Diego, for sharing such inspiring ideas and practical strategies. We're excited to move into the Q&A session now, so if you haven't already, please type your questions into the Q&A box or in the chat. Diego is here to provide more insights, and we'd love to hear what's on your mind. So you talked about the stickers before,
Mhm.
and do you believe these stickers work in college?
That's a very good question. Well, I taught community college, and then I taught college at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. And I thought they were gonna be so different from high schoolers. But in the end, student motivation is student motivation. And I believe that they will also appreciate the badges in and in college level. So that will be something that I will consider strongly.
Great, thank you. Now, let's move to the next question, which is for many of the activities that we mentioned, maybe they work with small classes, but how can you do it with classes with over 25?
I didn't particularly thought about small classes. When we're thinking about projects, we do groups if we have larger classes. But these are activities that are good for small classes, and I'm thinking about small class 20 students or large classes, and I'm thinking, I don't know if in the United States you have classes with 40, maybe 30 students at the most, but I have had classes with 40 students because there were a couple of years where I was replacing another teacher, so I had 40 students in the classroom, and I would just work in groups, the different activities that we propose.
Excellent, thank you. Now, our next question would be, how can we motivate native speakers in our Spanish classes if they find the material too basic?
Well, I will advise to watch my webinar from maybe what, a month ago, Sabrina, where I talk about strategies for heritage and native speakers. It's in the Clear World Languages YouTube channel, right?
Yes, it's both in the YouTube channel and it's also on our website. We can
Right.
give you that information later.
Mhm.
So the next question we have is there a way to connect English language learners with our Spanish classes?
English language learners. So we're talking about heritage students. It's the same question, right? Because English language learners um, are heritage students or native students who doesn't speak the community's language. Um, so if you don't have a heritage class just for that particular group of students, if they do not join your language classes, let's say your Spanish classes, um, we can involve them by doing exactly the same that I propose that we do with the students, the regular students that we have in our classrooms, meaning bring them to share about themselves, you know, bring them to talk about how they see life. And that's meaningful in a very, very strong way.
How do you encourage more speaking in classes that are 40 students and not just reading answers?
Oh, so in my classes, we don't read answers. In my classes, we speak. There is a set of speaking activities. And the speaking activities that we need to bring to the class must be speaking activities that reflect the real way that people talks. For example, I'm gonna give you an example. There are two people talking about a specific topic, and someone is hearing that conversation, and then they go and misconstruct what these people were talking about. I call that activity el chismoso or the gossiper. So these are speaking situations that we encounter every day in our lives. And I have done also a presentation with Cledward Languages on speaking activities that you can find in the YouTube channel.
Perfect, thank you. Now, when motivation doesn't work for students, what can someone do then? What would you suggest?
If motivation doesn't work for students, I always suggest that first we look at ourselves, um, because I know it's hard and it's hard to hear that, but in our hands we have a lot of the responsibility for that class motivation, unless we're talking about a specific school where student behavior and students' culture regarding classroom management is out of hands. But if that's not the situation, it's happening in your class, they are not motivated, okay, check yourself. Are we bringing those three things that Daniel Pink suggests? Are we creating autonomous students? Are we allowing opportunities for mastering? So it's important to think from our own perspective. And as I said, it's not easy. Um, I've been teaching for a very long time, and it has not always been successful. There was a time when I struggled and my students were not motivated, and I just stopped and asked them, created surveys. What's happening, what's working, what's not working, what would you like to see? And they destroyed me the first time that I did that. But we need to be, we have a goal in mind, which is having a class that really connects our students. So uh, we need to be willing to listen to what they have to say.
Perfect, Diego, thank you. Now, the first question was actually referring to the fluency challenge activity. How does it work? Could you give us more information on that?
The fluency challenge activity. There wasn't as much an activity where I was suggesting that we will allow the opportunity for students to see how much are they improving on their language skills. So instead of like, that's when I think that I talk about assessment. Instead of giving constant assessment, we come up with ways where student can see their progress. One way is through the batches, because it's it's physical. They know that they earned that badge because now they have this vocabulary or this set of expressions that they can use on a very natural way in their conversations. So I was just comparing that with what assessment usually looks like, because when we think about assessments, we think very in a very compartmentalized way, just specific things that we're going to be assessing on. To me, actually, as assessing should be another way to learn, not just to show what you have learned.
Great. Thank you so much. So we have two more questions at the moment.
Mhm.
Okay, there's one right now actually that came up on the chat, which is many students are focused on grades and only complete
Mm,
tasks to check a box rather
mm,
than focusing on learning something useful. Do you
mhm.
have recommendations for shifting this mindset?
Yeah, actually, the school where I work at, when I came, I noticed that that was the culture. I work in a school where families want their students to perform very well. And I came up with activities and games, but they just wanted papers where I could give them a grade and that can be transferred to the grade book. Um, so they were not used to connecting on a human level with their teacher. And that's so important. And when I talk about creating community, I talk about allowing our students to get to know us, because then you go from there. I'm here because I'm excited to share about this culture. I'm excited to share about this language. I'm going to show you how cool it is to be able to speak this language. And we move from the extrinsic motivational strategies to intrinsic motivational strategies. So we stop giving so many points for every little thing that they do, because that's the culture that they have, the culture of the point, the culture of the grade. We stop, you know, constantly grading. Let's spend more time using the language, more time creating activities that are appealing to them.
Great. Perfect. Then let's go to another question. This one would be more focused on materials. So, what text would you recommend for university students?
There's a Cladeword Languages has a program called Projectos, and I'm sure that Sabrina can also share maybe a link or an email where samples can be shared. So I sometimes I use Projectos with AP classes because of the approach. That is very, very useful for students that are a little older, but also to students who have different. Oh my gosh, Sabrina, you here?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Okay, interests. All right.
Great. And also regarding textbooks, more or less, which book would you recommend for middle school, seeing them once a week? And what advice would you give for motivation when you see them so little?
Okay. Well, middle school, middle school is the perfect age to really catch their attention for language learning if we do it the right way. Reporteros uno splits into reporteros A and B. Many middle schools use reporteros A for sixth grade, seventh grade, and reporteros 1B for eighth grade. And then they do the transition to high school going to reporteros dos. I have friends who are using this format, and it seems to be working well for them.
Thank you very much. Another question just came up on the chat, which is how can we help students to be comfortable to make mistakes?
Oh, not overcorrecting them, making mistakes part of the positive culture in our classroom. It's amazing how, when we are not correcting them constantly or not even correcting them once, they know the brain is telling them that they are not expressing it the right way. That's why the classroom time should be spent using the language, getting input in so many ways. because that's when the brain starts organizing the language.
Great. Going back to textbooks recommendations, which one would you recommend for Spanish 2, high school?
Okay, going back to Spanish too, I would say that if these students didn't have Spanish in middle school, they can start with Reporteros 1. But if they had Spanish in middle school, then start with Reporteros 2.
Great. And is there any software that you would recommend to develop vocabulary and self-confidence?
You know, now these days, textbook companies, they bring with so many materials. And again, Playboard Languages and the Reporteros program have a very robust online tool. What is the name of that? Do you remember, Sabrina?
Yes, is the KWL Hub.
There you go, where you can find, I mean, audios, videos, ways to record themselves. Obviously, through artificial intelligence, there are many interesting things. I do not recommend it, but I thought it was interesting. There's an application called Hablo, but they call it Hablo, where the student interacts with a chatbot that has an image and speaks to you, but it's very based on correcting what you're saying. Um, Maybe that's something interesting to explore. Hablo.
Great. And in another question, have you had the challenge of colleagues in your department not getting along to this new approach or strategies, and how did you deal with it?
Okay, this is a tough question because I'm an active teacher. I respect my colleagues, um, but I have seen many situations like this in other schools, um, where people has an idea of how language should be taught, and that's the first mistake because you don't teach languages, you facilitate languages. So the discussion between grammar-based instruction or comprehensible it instruction acquisition, second language acquisition, and that's still a reality. So when we come up with topics like motivation and how should we open more our classes to the student, that's not easy for many teachers. Um, I believe that most of these teachers are used to work in a specific way. They think that it's working because they are not having issues with the kids, are not having issues with the families. But at the same time, how many of those kids get out of high school and keep working with the language or keep connected with the culture? I tell them the goal here is not the AP score. The goal here is to connect them throughout their life, their whole life, with the culture and the language. So, trainings like this can be suggested, but open, honest conversations are important. But sometimes we need a moderator, we need someone who can sit with you guys and see the different angles.
Great, thank you. And we actually have a lot of people asking about if you have anything for AP Spanish, both literature, language and culture, or in general.
As far as what, Sabrina? Are they asking about books?
I think it is, yes. Yes, there are two
Well,
questions regarding books.
Sabrina has some great news, right?
Yes, we're actually very happy to tell you that very soon we will be releasing a book specifically for AP. You can actually find more about it, but we are going to be in ACTFL, as we mentioned before, and we're going to actually be talking more about it. We're going to have some of the editors over there. So I'm going to put the link for ACTFL here again. And of course, you can always send us an email and we can share a link with you so we can keep you up to date with that. So that would be a really good recommendation for AP.
It's called Generación AP. Generación AP. As far as literature goes, my friends, which is another class that I also teach, it's harder. You know, it's harder for editorial companies to come up with a program for AP Lit because not many schools teach that class. And You see that Abriendo Puertas, which was a popular text, disappear. Reflexiones disappear. Right now we have Azulejo, which is the one that I'm using in my classes. Um, but the value of these textbooks is the kind of activities that they propose to work with the different works. Because in reality, you most of the readings, if not all of them, you can find for free online. Um, so I just don't see another AP literature textbook coming soon.
Perfect. We still have some questions coming up, so I think we have three more. Let's see if we have the time to do them. So the first one of these would be for a block schedule of 88 minutes, which can be challenging to keep students motivated. Which helpful tips would you give them?
But look, the language classroom, no matter how long the class is, should represent an electrocardiogram. Okay, meaning that it has to go like this. It has peaks and downs, but never this, never a continuous line, because that means death, right? So we need to be changing the different things that we bring to the class. We start with a conversation, the story that we made up to share with our students, right? When we work on projects, we don't have to work in a project for two classes and then dedicate the next two classes to present that project. No, let's compartmentalize, let's divide the class into chunks. And today we're going to work on the project for 20 minutes. And when it's time to present those projects, today 5 people are going to present, not the whole class, because that's when the motivation goes down for the student to be, listening to the same thing over and over, or to do the same kind of activity that disconnects them. So all these ideas that I share with you today, just bring them in different forms in different times of the class. Um, and also, don't be afraid to improvise. How many times have you been teaching and suddenly you remember something? And this is kind of crazy because we were talking about AP Lit class and we were talking about Francisco de Quevedo and conceptismo and degradation. The last part of his poem, it says that everything turns from this into nothing. And I remember for some reason the song by Kansas, Dust in the Wind. I'm like, guys, have you heard the song Dust in the Wind? What? Of course, it's from the 70s. So I find the video and I show them the video. The student realizes that you're embedded into what you're doing in your instruction. It's part of your life. It's not just a lesson.
Great. Thank you, Diego. So I think we're going to take that one as our last questions. For
All
those
right.
of you who still have questions that were unanswered, please feel free to send us an email at marketing@fletwl.com. We will be sure to send them to Diego so he can reply, or we can help you out if we know the answer as well. So, wrapping up, I want to thank everyone for joining us and for the lively discussion. And before we close, we'd appreciate if you could just take just a moment to fill out the feedback form. It is a quick way to help us improve future webinars. We will also want to remind you that the Reportero series, which is in Spanish, using today's examples, is also available in French and German. Feel free to request an exam copy to explore this resource further. I'm going to put those links in the chat right now for you. The first one is for the feedback. And here I'm going to place the one for the Reporters series, French, Spanish, and German. And also, and lastly, we'd love to connect with you at ACTFul, as I said before. We'll be at booth 1113 hosting some fantastic events throughout the conference. So if you're planning to attend, please let us know by filling out the form on our ACTFul page. I'm going to put that here as well. We'd love to see you there. Again, Diego, thank you very much for your presentation. And
Thank you, Sabrina.
thank you. And thank you again for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Adiós a todos. Bye.
Bye.